I'm sorry, but I didn't inherit a single penny of the inheritance, so I can't help you. I've decided to give all the inheritance to Sarah."
The moment she heard that, the smiles disappeared from Michael and Mary's faces. "What do you mean? Sarah said you inherited all the inheritance."
"That's why you married me?"
"That's not true. I married you because I love you."
"So it's fine, isn't it? Don't make such a scary face. We can be happy even without money if we have love, right?"
Ugh, you're so annoying. There's no way I would like someone like you. I married you for the inheritance, okay? Are you happy now? I admitted it. So give me the inheritance quickly."
"Stop it."
My sister started laughing uncontrollably as she said that. I was watching the whole scene unfold through the surveillance camera and began the final preparations. The day of revenge against my ex-husband, which I had been waiting for so long, had finally arrived. My name is Sarah James, 34 years old. I'm a single mother raising a 9-year-old son. Having been raised by a single mother myself, I saw her struggles and was determined never to become one. But life is full of surprises. 10 years ago, I married Michael James, a senior in college who I'd been dating for about 5 years. He was handsome, athletic, and a good student, so he was very popular in college. On the other hand, I was more of an introvert, with few friends and not the type to stand out. We were polar opposites. But one day, he suddenly confessed his feelings for me. At the time, I had no reason to refuse. Looking back, it was completely the wrong choice. What's more, the other girls would make fun of us, saying we were a mismatched couple. I often wondered why such a handsome guy would be with someone like me. Thinking about it now, the reason was simple, but I was too naive to realize it back then. Every time I felt down because of their teasing, my husband would say, "Don't mind those silly girls. No matter what anyone says, I love you, Sarah. And I don't think we're a mismatched couple. In fact, I'm grateful that you're going out with me. You should have more confidence in yourself." I thought to myself, a handsome and kind person like him as my boyfriend? What good deeds did I do in my past life? I must have done something amazing to be appreciated by people like this. I even felt incredibly grateful to my past self. I met my husband at the equestrian club's welcome party for new students. I've always been bad at sports, but for some reason, I loved and was good at horseback riding. Horses were cute, and one of the few beings I could open my heart to, as I didn't have many friends. Being with horses made me happy, and I wanted to continue horseback riding in college. So as soon as I entered college, I decided to visit the equestrian club. But being a sports club at a private university, there were many seniors and classmates who were quite intimidating. I was worried about whether I could fit in, but my love for horses prevailed, and I decided to take a chance and join. I was anxious about the first day, but after joining, the people around me were unexpectedly kind. It made me think that there are no bad people who love horses. Everyone's love for horses was overflowing. And then came the welcome party for new students. We were divided into several groups for a barbecue, and my husband was in my group. He was the leader of the group, efficiently preparing for the barbecue. The girls from other groups would also come to our group to talk to him whenever they had a chance. Even from my perspective, as someone who didn't know him at all, it was obvious that he was popular. When all the preparations were finished, he asked me why I decided to join the equestrian club. My father passed away when I was in elementary school, and I grew up in a single-parent household. My mother raised my sister Mary, who is 3 years older than me, and me by herself. She worked hard so that we wouldn't have to struggle or endure hardships, and she told us we could each have one extracurricular activity. That's how I started horseback riding. The reason I started was because of my deceased father. When he was still alive, he took me to a horse ranch. There were several horses there, and I couldn't forget the majestic sight of them. When I told my husband the story, he said he was also from a single-parent household, and we connected. Although he had many friends around him, I felt happy that he was only talking to me. I had little experience talking to men, so I quickly realized I was falling for him. However, there were rumors that he had a girlfriend at the time, so I thought it was just a dream that I could ever be his girlfriend. But in the first place, I had never talked to such a handsome guy in my life, so I was just happy to be talking to him. I should have been content with that. But as we continued talking every time we went to the club, I was drawn to his kindness. But he had a girlfriend, and I convinced myself that there was no way he would ever be interested in someone like me. I remember desperately trying not to fall in love with him. One day, I was walking through the school building when I saw him walking towards me. I was about to call out to him, but I hesitated because there was an unfamiliar girl next to him. I thought she must be his girlfriend. As I was hesitating, he called out to me, "Hey, Sarah, how are you? Are you coming to the club today?" He had his usual demeanor. He didn't say anything about the girl next to him, which made me even more curious. After a moment of hesitation, I spoke. "Yes, I'm going. Is that beautiful girl next to you your girlfriend?" I asked, hoping that she wasn't. "Yeah, we've been dating for 3 years now. We went to the same high school, and she came to this university. So I did too. We're even living together now."
"It's nice to meet you. My boyfriend always talks about you. You should come to our wedding someday."
He answered my question and even told me things I didn't ask, completely crushing my hopes. But his girlfriend was so beautiful that I found myself accepting his answer. "I see. You look great together." I don't know if I meant those words sincerely, but I think I managed to say them with a smile. And at that moment, even though he hadn't confessed his feelings for me, I felt like I had experienced my first heartbreak. However, I thought this was a good opportunity to focus on horseback riding. I was gradually making friends at the club, and going to the club was becoming fun. Even if my love life wasn't going well, I had horses. It was around this time that I received a call from my mother. The phone rang suddenly, just as I was about to leave for the club.
"Hello, Sarah? I have something to talk about, so could you come back home this weekend? I've asked your sister to come back too. Let's have dinner together as a family for the first time in a while."
I had a bad feeling about this. It wasn't like my mother to suddenly call me back without telling me what it was about, and her voice sounded somewhat weak. I had started living alone when I entered college. I knew it must have been quite difficult for her, being a single mother and all. But she always said, "If it's for your future," and generously supported me financially.
"Don't worry about money. Your father's inheritance was more than we expected,"
was her usual phrase. But she always had a part-time job, and we didn't live extravagantly, so I always thought it was just something she said to avoid worrying us. I never imagined that this inheritance would become a trigger for a major battle. "Is everything okay? I haven't seen you call me back home so suddenly before."
"Oh, maybe I was just lonely because both my daughters are living on their own now. You were always at home, Sarah, so I didn't feel lonely."
I had a bad feeling, but I tried to tell myself it was nothing. "I see. I hope that's the case. I'm also looking forward to seeing you all again."
"You've always been so carefree since you were little. I envy that. I tend to overthink things when I have something on my mind. I wonder if siblings can be so different. I'm sure you wouldn't have to worry so much about love if you were like your sister."
I hung up the phone, still feeling uneasy. But there was no point in worrying unnecessarily, so I decided to put it out of my mind. On the weekend, I went back to my parents' house as my mother had asked. I had been so worried about why I was called back that I couldn't sleep well all week. The more I tried not to think about it, the more it bothered me. When I opened the front door, my mother was watching TV and laughing, completely unaware that I had come back. Seeing her laughing, I thought maybe my bad feeling was just that, a bad feeling. It seemed Mary wasn't back yet. "I'm home." I felt a little lighter and greeted her cheerfully.
"Welcome back, Sarah. It's been a while. I'm glad to see you're doing well. Is college fun? Are you having any trouble living alone?"
She bombarded me with questions all at once. I could feel her concern for me,
and it made me realize that no matter how old I get, I'm still her child. As I was answering my mother's questions, Mary came back. "I'm home. Sarah, long time no see. Is college fun? How's living alone?" I laughed at the exact same questions my mother had asked. Do parents and children really resemble each other this much? Maybe I'll always be a child in my sister's eyes, too. I gave her the same answers I had given my mother. When I finished, my mother started to speak. "So, I'll tell you why I called you both here today. I don't want to drag it out, and it'll just get harder to say. And please don't take this too seriously." My mother's expression brought back my bad feeling. I looked next to me, and Mary must have sensed something too. Her face had gone pale. "To be blunt, I went for a checkup the other day, and I have cancer." For a moment, I couldn't understand what she was saying. My mother, who was so full of life and had just been casually watching TV, had cancer? It's true, I had a bad feeling all along. But of course I didn't want it to be true. And it wasn't this kind of bad feeling. I thought it would be something like a broken bone, or moving abroad, or marrying a strange man, something like that. But now my mother was saying she had cancer? As I struggled to react, Mary calmly started asking my mother questions. "But even so, cancer is curable nowadays, right? You're going to have surgery and all that, aren't you?" I was amazed at how calm she could be in this situation. It's true, cancer is curable nowadays. I listened to her questions with hopeful eyes, waiting for my mother's answer. "Well, it seems it's incurable. I asked the doctor about everything, including advanced treatment and other expensive options. But it's no use. I think this is what it means to have your mind go blank." My mind was completely blank. I had no idea what the right thing to say was. Next to me, Mary seemed to be in shock, but she quickly recovered and continued her questions. "So, does that mean you don't have much time left?" I could hear the trembling in her voice. Even Mary, who was usually so composed, must be having a hard time accepting this. "It's about 3 years. Even with cancer, that's considered a long time. And it's thanks to the advanced treatment I'm receiving. I'm grateful to your father." I had been thinking that it might be only a year or so 3 years felt long. Thanks to my pessimistic thinking, I found myself feeling a bit relieved to hear that she had 3 years. I was thinking about how I wanted to spend as much time as possible with my mother for the rest of her life, when Mary asked her another question. "I've never heard this before, but is it true that Dad's inheritance is quite large? I always thought it was a lie to reassure us. But you're saying you can afford advanced treatment this time. Does that mean we have tens of millions of dollars or something?" She was right. I had been so happy about the length of my mother's remaining life that I hadn't noticed it at all. I've heard that advanced treatment is very expensive. How could she afford to continue such treatment for a long time? Isn't that difficult for a single-parent household? Or could this also be a lie to reassure us? "Didn't I tell you, girls? It's a long story, but it's true. It's not a lie to reassure you or anything." With that, my mother began to tell her story. According to her, my father's family ran a large real estate business, and since he was an only child, he naturally inherited it. However, when he was diagnosed with a terminal illness, the only relative who could take over was my mother. But my mother had no experience in business and knew nothing about real estate, so my father, not wanting to burden her, decided to quit the real estate business. It seems the land my father was dealing with was all in prime locations in the city, but he decided to sell it all, and a huge amount of money came pouring in. And that amount is probably far beyond your imagination. My mother said this with a mischievous look on her face, as if waiting for our next question. It was here that I finally decided to speak up. I felt like I could talk calmly about this topic. Besides, I had a lot of questions I wanted to ask about this. Come to think of it, our family had never had financial problems after my father passed away. I was raised in the same way as any other ordinary family, without any inconvenience. However, Because we were a single-parent household, I felt that it must have been hard for my mother to raise us. But that was physically, and I never felt any financial difficulties. Did we really have tens of millions of dollars? Thinking about such things, I asked my mother, "So is it like what Mary said, that we have tens of millions of dollars?" "It's not just tens of millions. It's several orders of magnitude more. Well, let's just say it's over $10 billion. I wanted to give it all to you in the end, so I haven't touched it much. So if I die, this money will go to you, so please don't waste it. It's the precious money your father left us." Again, I couldn't comprehend it. My eyes were wide open. Seeing me speechless, Mary spoke up again. $10 billion? I can't even imagine how much that is. But then why were you always working part-time, Mom? I thought you were working so hard. And it's true that we weren't poor, but we weren't rich either, were we? That's to prevent you from developing a strange sense of money. That's why I haven't really touched your father's inheritance. I was thinking of using it only in case of emergency. I never thought I'd be using it for my own cancer treatment, though. But rest assured, even after using it for this treatment, there will still be a considerable amount left. My mother smiled, a little sadly. Seeing her like that, I wished from the bottom of my heart that she would live a little longer, even if it meant giving up all the money. And I think Mary felt the same way. There was a brief silence between us. It was her who broke the silence. I understand the situation. It's hard to accept, but even if I'm depressed, it won't change anything. It might be too late to say this now, but let me take care of you. With those words, we came to the conclusion that there was no point in just being sad, and that we should all enjoy the rest of our mother's life to the fullest as a family. After that, we had dinner as usual, just the three of us. Eating like this, it felt like this moment could last forever. That night, I returned to my apartment. When I was alone, the reality of my mother's cancer suddenly hit me, and tears started overflowing. I was scared of losing my mother. Just then, the phone rang. I saw it was my husband calling. Being alone was painful now, and I wanted someone to listen to my worries, even if it was my ex-boyfriend. But I didn't want to bother him. I hesitated to answer, but in the end, I decided to pick up. "Hello?" I could tell my voice was nasal. My husband must have noticed it too. "Hello? Are you crying?" His words made me cry even more. There was a warmth in his voice. "I'm sorry. It's just, a lot has happened." "I see. I'll listen if you want to talk." He said that, so I told him everything about my mother's cancer that I had heard today. My husband also said that it was fortunate that my mother still had 3 years left to live. "My father also had cancer, and he only had a month left. We should be grateful that we still have time to spend together." He cheered me up. He also asked me what kind of treatment my mother was planning to have. When I started talking about advanced treatment, I regretted it. He would definitely wonder where we got the money for that. And as expected, he asked me how we could afford advanced treatment. I hesitated to tell him about the inheritance. I thought I shouldn't, but I trusted him. And after making him promise not to tell anyone, I decided to tell him everything. I had no idea that this would be the beginning of a nightmare. $10 billion? That's amazing. But thanks to that money, you can be with your mother for a little longer. You should be grateful to your father. At that time, his words gave me a sense of relief. A few months later, I heard a rumor that my husband had broken up with his girlfriend. Apparently, he had dumped her, and he was telling everyone that he liked me. Because of that, I started getting badmouthed by the other girls at the club, and it became difficult for me to go. As a result, I stopped going to the club very often. Then one day, I ran into my husband at school, and he called out to me, "You haven't been coming to the club lately. Is everything okay?" I wanted to tell him it was because of him, but I couldn't. So I just tried to walk past him silently. But then he grabbed my arm and pulled me. I had no choice but to follow him, and he took me to an empty classroom. It was quiet, but he broke the silence.
I think you've already noticed, but I broke up with my girlfriend. I've fallen for you. Will you go out with me?
Maybe somewhere in my heart, I had been waiting for these words. The anger I had been feeling just moments ago melted away. I accepted his confession. From that day on, he protected me at the club and was like a real prince. My college life was rosy thanks to him. When he graduated before me, I was lonely and felt like I had lost all hope in life. But he continued to care for me even after graduation, so I felt loved. And 2 years after I graduated, he proposed to me, and we got married. I quit my job after we got married.
Just do the housework as much as you can. You don't have to do anything else. I just want you to be there. Always be healthy and by my side.
I really thought that I was the happiest person in the world at that time. But misfortune struck suddenly. My mother passed away. She had overcome her 3-year prognosis and was even able to attend my wedding. By that time, she was no longer able to walk and was in a wheelchair. But she still had a smile on her face and walked down the aisle with me. Attending my daughter's wedding was my dream. Thank you for making my dream come true. It feels like just yesterday that she held my hand and said those words. It was as if she had been waiting to see me get married before she passed away. She died a few months after my wedding. I was overcome with grief and cried all the time. But my husband kept encouraging me and supporting me. But from this time on, I felt like he was gradually changing. One day, he suddenly said this.
By the way, what's happening with the inheritance?
I'd left all that to Mary, so I didn't know the details. I don't really know, but it's a huge amount, so I think it will be a while before we hear about the inheritance.
When you find out when the inheritance will be coming in, let me know.
He was unusually concerned about the inheritance. At first, I thought he was just worried about me, but I started to think something was wrong when he said this.
You should think of my mother as your own. You can make up for what you couldn't do for your own mother. For example, you could rebuild her house or give her a trip as a present. I'm sure you have regrets about not being able to take care of your own mother. You could even pay off her debts for her.
What was he talking about? I understood that it was important to take care of my mother-in-law, but paying off her debts? Besides, I had just heard about her having debts for the first time. Surprised, I decided to probe a little. Debts? I've never heard about that before. How much does she owe?
I don't know the exact amount, but I've heard it's around $100,000. So it's impossible for an ordinary person. But with the inheritance of over $10 billion you mentioned before, I think you can easily pay it off. You haven't been working, and you have been relying on me, so I'm sure you'll want to repay me when you get the inheritance, right? You can do all that by helping my mother.
Apparently, my mother-in-law had been tricked by a good investment story. She was told it was a sure profit, so she borrowed money from everywhere. She also seems to have spent a lot of money on the assumption that the investment would be successful. There was no way I was going to pay for that. Besides, he was counting on my inheritance. We both agreed that I would quit my job. It was my mother's precious inheritance, and I couldn't use it like that. I can't use it like that. We can go on a trip together, though. I'm sure my mother would be happy about that. When I said that, my husband became visibly annoyed. But he didn't give up, and every time something came up, he would tell me to take care of his mother. And finally, even my mother-in-law started coming to our house out of the blue, saying things like she was struggling with her debts, and that she wanted things. My husband didn't try to stop her at all. In fact, he even encouraged her. I thought taking care of one's mother-in-law should be voluntary, not something to be demanded. Besides, if they wanted something so badly, I thought they should just do it themselves. At first, I just smiled and brushed it off, but one day, I finally told my husband that I wasn't interested in taking care of his mother right now, and that I would never pay off her debts. Then, he muttered something.
Is that all you're worth?
I wanted to think I had misheard him, but from that day on, I felt like he had definitely changed. He became rough with his words, and his attitude became cold. He had never called me you before, but from that day on, he started calling me you. Maybe this was good timing, or maybe it wasn't. But around this time, I found out I was pregnant. When I told my husband, he didn't seem happy at all, unlike how he would have been before.
Don't tell me you can't do housework because you're pregnant. You're a housewife, so you have to do housework no matter what. Besides, I'm definitely not going to help with childcare, even after the baby is born.
Instead of being happy, he said the worst possible things. Where had my husband gone? Maybe this was the real him. The thought made me distrustful of people. I also told my mother-in-law that I was pregnant, but she also said the worst possible things. I had a feeling she would, but it still hurt to hear it. I feel sorry for the child who will be raised by such a cold person who doesn't even take care of her mother-in-law. I wish Michael had married a kinder woman. Then I could have looked forward to the birth of my grandchild. I never thought the birth of a grandchild could be so unenjoyable. Who would want to take care of a mother-in-law who said such things? But even if I protested, I could see my husband and mother-in-law ganging up on me and making sarcastic remarks. To avoid hurting myself any further, I endured it. Taking advantage of that, my husband started making sarcastic remarks to me every day.
You're such a terrible woman for not working, even though you were able to marry me. I'm glad I'm not like you. What do you do for me? I don't even want your child. Is that really my child?
Was there any reason to continue this marriage when I was being told such things? I thought about that, but with the baby in my belly, I couldn't easily get a divorce. Although my mother had told me about the inheritance, I hadn't actually seen it with my own eyes. She said it would be a while before we talked about the inheritance. So if the inheritance was just my mother's misunderstanding, I would be living a life with no place to go. It wouldn't be a problem if it was just me, but I didn't want my child to be involved. And when I actually went into labor, my husband was no help at all. He just kept playing games while I was sick in bed. And when I couldn't do the housework because of the labor, my mother-in-law came to my house and did the housework for me while making fun of me. I was able to do housework just fine when I was pregnant with Michael, you know. Don't you think you're being too indulgent? You're useless for a housewife. Hearing that made me feel even worse. I wished my mother was here to support me. A few months later, it was time to talk about the inheritance. The inheritance my mother left us was $12.6 billion. When I heard that, I felt a strange sense of wonder like, so my mother was telling the truth. And I felt relieved that I could finally get a divorce. When I was about to split it with Mary, she suggested something. Sarah, you have a child on the way, so you should inherit it all. I'm not even married, and I'd be troubled to have this much money. I felt like I had finally touched human kindness after a long time. Tears naturally welled up in my eyes. Seeing that, Mary was surprised, but I didn't want to worry her, so I didn't tell her about my husband and mother-in-law. When I got home, my husband, who had somehow gotten wind of it, asked me right away, "How much did you inherit?" I felt like he was going to hit me, so I lied. Mary inherited it all.
The only reason I married you was for the inheritance.
I had been subjected to terrible words lately, but it still hurt to be told this so directly.
Do you really think I married you because I loved you? Why do you think I broke up with my beautiful girlfriend and married you? It was only for the inheritance.
Thinking back now, he started approaching me after I told him about my father's inheritance. I hated myself for being so naive and not noticing. Then, he started calling his mother right in front of me.
Hello. That stupid woman says she didn't inherit anything. We can get a divorce now, right? She wasn't going to give us any money even if she had it, but now she doesn't even have any. This is pointless.
I never thought he was such a terrible man. I could hear his mother's voice through the phone. I thought she might share some of it with us if she got the money, but she doesn't even have any. I'm impressed she put up with this marriage for so long. You should divorce her right now and marry a beautiful girl. Being with that woman is lowering your value. As soon as he hung up the phone, he said to me with a smile on his face for some reason,
So that's it. Let's get a divorce. There's no reason for me to be with you anymore." After being told that, there was no reason to continue the marriage, and I was thinking about getting a divorce anyway, so it was convenient. It would be better for the child to get a divorce. "Okay, let's get a divorce." "Of course, you don't have a choice." From there, the divorce was quick. From an outsider's perspective, I was just a pathetic woman. A pregnant woman who was treated badly by her husband and mother-in-law and then abandoned. I was actually worried about how I was going to raise my child. But that was okay. I had done well just by keeping my mother's precious inheritance from that man. After that, my son Masaru was born, and I raised him as a single mother. I asked my ex-husband for child support, but he said I should just get it from Mary, who has the inheritance, and he never paid. He also showed no intention of acknowledging my son as his own. My ex-husband was cold, not only to me, but also to my son, but I decided to give up on everything and just avoid him. As long as I could forgive my ex-husband, everything would be over. Fortunately, having my mother's enormous inheritance allowed me to have peace of mind. Masaru grew up healthily and started going to elementary school. He grew up to be a very kind child, which made me very happy as a mother. One day, when I was listening to him talk about his day at school, he said that a man had talked to him on the street. He said he was my dad, said he got a lot of money from my aunt, and asked me to keep it a secret from my dad. He said he would keep seeing me if I did. He didn't acknowledge my son as his own, yet he approached him and tried to use him. That was crazy. I warned my son not to talk to strangers. I told my son that his father had gone to heaven and that he would never see him again. It was so annoying that he suddenly showed up and called himself his father. Even after the divorce, my ex-husband continued to target our inheritance, which terrified me. I decided to report this incident to the police. I couldn't wait until something happened to my son. The police listened to me seriously. Around that time, I got a call from Mary. She said my ex-husband had suddenly shown up at her house. He said he actually loved me. He was getting involved with my family again and again. And what kind of nerve did he have to go to confess to his ex-wife's sister? When I got divorced, I told Mary that the reason for the divorce was difference in values. But at this point, I had no choice but to tell her the real reason. You should have told me sooner. I can't believe that he was such a terrible man. You can't judge a book by its cover, but you know what? I have a good plan. Mary calmly explained our plan. It was a plan to teach my ex-husband a lesson. She was amazing. How could she be so smart at a time like this? But to carry out that plan, she would have to tarnish her reputation. First of all, she would have to marry my ex-husband. I can't involve you in this, Mary. I can't sacrifice you like that. It's okay. I never really wanted to get married anyway. Besides, it's better than letting my little sister be bullied. I was so glad that she was my sister. And also, she started to get close to my ex-husband. It was obvious that he was after her inheritance, but he was trying to hide it. Meanwhile, after I reported my son's incident to the police, they started patrolling his route to school. They also gave me regular counseling. When I told them about Mary's plan, they gave me an idea that might allow us to punish my ex-husband even more. They also gave me advice on other things to prepare for that. I was skeptical, but I decided to follow the police's instructions. If the plan went according to the police's instructions, my husband and mother-in-law would be in a lot of trouble. I wondered if it would really go smoothly, but the plan was steadily progressing. My ex-husband was marrying Mary. He was whispering sweet nothings to Mary every day, just like he did when he was married to me. We knew everything, but he was such a pathetic man. But he was still after the inheritance, and he quickly showed his true colors. My mother-in-law came to Mary's house and tearfully said she couldn't live on her pension alone and needed help. My ex-husband also said that he felt sorry for his mother and wanted to help her. These words were the signal for Mary to start the next part of the plan. We immediately installed surveillance cameras to gather evidence and waited for my ex-husband to make his next move. Then, he made his next move very quickly. He was taking action just 3 weeks after getting married. How greedy for money was he? My mother-in-law came to Mary's house again. I was watching the surveillance camera in real time. I heard you were going to help me out. Thank you. You're so different from your sister. Of course. You're more reliable and capable than Sarah. You're doing the right thing with the inheritance. No one said they were going to help her. They were just twisting things to suit their own convenience. They must have been living in a dream world. I'm sorry, but I didn't inherit a single penny of the inheritance, so I can't help you. I've decided to give all the inheritance to Sarah. If it were Sarah, she might have helped you out a little by now, but I'm sure she wouldn't help her ex-husband, even if they were divorced. The moment she said that, the smiles disappeared from Michael and Mary's faces. What do you mean? Sarah said you inherited all the inheritance. That's true. That's why you married me. She pretended not to know anything. That's not true. He married you because he loves you. How dare you tell such a blatant lie? So it's fine, isn't it? Don't make such a scary face. We can be happy even without money if we have love, right?
Ugh, you're so annoying. Don't get cocky. You sisters are really disgusting. You're a pair of lying sisters. There's no way I would like someone like you. You should have known better. I married you for the inheritance, okay? Are you happy now? I admitted it, so give me the inheritance quickly. Once I get that, I'll divorce you or whatever. I want to get away from you sisters as soon as possible.
Stop it. Mary started laughing uncontrollably as she said that. Michael kept glaring at her. I was watching the whole scene unfold through the surveillance camera. How pathetic they looked. And above all, how foolish. Mary looked at the surveillance camera as I was watching and winked. Seeing that, I began the final preparations. The day had finally come. The long-awaited day of revenge against my ex-husband. I headed to Mary's house with the people involved. As soon as I arrived, I opened the door, and all 3 of their eyes were on me. It's okay to cheat if you marry for inheritance, and you might not realize it, but you're already a criminal.
What are you talking about? Do you have any proof?
Stop making false accusations. I'll sue you for slander. I introduced the 2 people who came with me. This is the detective, and this is the lawyer. We're here after investigating everything. The original plan was just to record my ex-husband's despicable behavior on camera and show it to everyone to embarrass him. However, the police told me that such a man might be doing other despicable things, so I should investigate him thoroughly. So I hired a detective and a lawyer just in case. It turned out that he was doing far more despicable things than I had expected. According to the detective, my ex-husband hadn't actually broken up with his beautiful girlfriend from college, and they were still together. And he was spending a lot of money on her. He never spent any money on us, but he must have spent it all on her. Also, my mother-in-law had been using a family card under Mary's name without her permission. My ex-husband had given it to her. This is fraud, even if they are family. It wasn't something that could be excused with a simple, I didn't know. If Mary hadn't lied about the inheritance, we wouldn't have investigated this far, and I might have forgiven them for minor things. But because she lied, everything came to light. They were a pathetic parent and child. I laid out the evidence in front of them, who were glaring at me with fear in their eyes. We have photos, recordings, and everything, so you can't deny it anymore. Seeing the evidence, the faces of the 2, who had been so arrogant until now, turned pale. Well, this is clearly cheating. I won't do anything. But Sarah has a right to claim compensation for being cheated on and deceived. Hearing that, the lawyer immediately started preparing to claim compensation. My ex-husband resisted, but he reluctantly signed when the lawyer told him it would become a legal matter. Regarding my mother-in-law's case, I called the police in front of them and explained the situation in detail. She kept shouting that she didn't do anything until she was taken away, but everything would come to light in the investigation. We had already confirmed with the credit card company that there were a lot of records of brand-name goods that Mary didn't remember buying. In the end, my ex-husband, who was supposed to be after the inheritance, ended up having to pay about $2 million in compensation, and my mother-in-law became a criminal. But she begged Mary to spare her from being prosecuted and imprisoned. She wanted to make amends. My sister, in her kindness, accepted a large sum of money as compensation, and the case was settled out of court. In other words, my ex-husband, who was also after the inheritance, ended up having to pay compensation. Of course, we also made her pay back the amount she had fraudulently used. It came to about $4 million in total. Mary and I couldn't stop laughing at this ironic result. Honestly, I don't need any more money, but now I'm getting even more. I told my friends about my ex-husband's despicable behavior. The story quickly spread among the former members of the equestrian club, and my ex-husband could no longer attend the alumni reunions. Everyone said that they couldn't believe he was this kind of person. I also think he was putting on an act of being a good guy in the club. Mary and I were happy that we were able to protect our parents' inheritance, and at the same time, we decided to discuss how to use this inheritance for the benefit of society. $12.6 billion was an amount we could never use up, and even with this money, there was a possibility that I would be targeted by another strange man. I decided to set aside several $billion for my son Masaru, and use the rest for something meaningful. I thought I would like to donate it to something, but I would think about what to donate it to later. I thought it might be a good idea to let my son, who will live on in the future, decide where to donate it. Thinking about such things, I live an ordinary life today. I'm sure I don't look like a woman with $12.6 billion inheritance to those around me. I heard a rumor that my ex-husband had run out of savings because he had to pay compensation. Because of that, he couldn't give his beautiful girlfriend any more money, and she dumped him. Also, one of the former members of the equestrian club was a colleague of his at his company, and that colleague told everyone at the company about this incident, so it became a huge rumor throughout the company. Angered by this, my ex-husband called that colleague and verbally abused him. As a result, he was fired. Because he was fired, he was also having trouble finding a new job, and he was getting desperate. In the neighborhood, he was nicknamed the guy who got in trouble with the police, and no one would talk to him anymore. He also had no way to pay the compensation, so he was working from morning till night. Originally, I might have helped him out a little with the $12.6 billion, but now he was a complete stranger, so there was no way I would. I hope he continues to suffer. The case with my ex-husband and mother-in-law was a long battle, but it was a good lesson in judging people. I will use this lesson to live happily with my son from now on.